In the remote deserts of the Middle East, beneath layers of sand that have concealed secrets for over 4,000 years, archaeologists have stumbled upon something that shouldn't exist. Massive stone structures. Walls built with blocks weighing hundreds of tons. Doorways sized for beings 3, 4, even 5 times the height of modern humans. The scientific community is baffled. Mainstream archaeology has no explanation. But those of us who study the ancient texts, we're not surprised at all. Welcome back to another deep investigation here on the channel. What you're about to witness isn't speculation. These aren't myths or legends passed down through campfire stories. These are physical ruins, tangible evidence, archaeological sites that modern science is only now beginning to acknowledge. Sites that perfectly match the descriptions found in the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and even Genesis itself. The Nephilim were real, and their cities remain. I'm about to take you on a journey through time and space to locations around the globe where evidence of giant civilizations still stands, mocking our modern understanding of ancient history. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why these discoveries are being suppressed, what they reveal about biblical accuracy, and what it means for our understanding of human origins. This is the story of the lost cities of the Nephilim giants. And fair warning, once you see this evidence, you can't unsee it. Let's dive in. Before we explore the physical evidence, we need to establish the textual foundation. Because without understanding what the ancient texts tell us about the Nephilim and their civilizations, we won't recognize the significance of what archaeologists are now finding. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, gives us the abbreviated account. The sons of God, the Watchers, came down to earth, took human women as wives, and produced offspring. Verse 4 states clearly, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Giants in the earth. Mighty men of old. Men of renown. The Hebrew word translated as giants is Nephilim, literally meaning the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. These weren't just tall people. These were hybrid beings of enormous stature and power. But Genesis gives us only the headline. For the full story, we turn to the Book of Enoch, accepted as scripture by Ethiopian Orthodox Christians and quoted directly by Jude in the New Testament. Enoch chapter 7 describes the Nephilim in detail. Verse 2 tells us they grew to enormous height. Ancient sources suggest anywhere from 15 feet to over 400 feet tall, depending on the generation and lineage. They consumed all the resources of mankind. When food ran out, they turned on humanity itself, devouring human flesh. But here's what most people miss. The Nephilim didn't just wander the earth as nomadic monsters. They built civilizations. They established kingdoms. They constructed cities. Enoch 7:1 mentions they taught humanity many things: metalworking, warfare, cosmetics, sorcery, and architecture. The fallen Watchers possessed supernatural knowledge of construction, astronomy, and advanced technologies that humans of that era shouldn't have had access to. The Book of Giants, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, expands on this. It describes the Nephilim rulers establishing domains, building fortresses, and creating monuments to their power. These weren't primitive beings living in caves. They were organized, intelligent, and ambitious, creating structures that would last millennia. Numbers 13:33 confirms that Nephilim survived the flood in some form, because the Israelite spies reported seeing them in Canaan. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Grasshoppers. That's how normal humans appear to these beings. Imagine the scale. Imagine what structures beings of that size would require. Imagine the cities they would build. Deuteronomy 2 and 3 catalog various giant races. The Rephaim, the Emim, the Zamzummim, the Anakim. These weren't scattered individuals. These were peoples, tribes, nations. King Og of Bashan, the last of the Rephaim giants, had an iron bed 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. His capital city had massive walls and fortifications sized for beings of his stature. The ancient world was dominated by giants, and they left their mark in stone. Now, modern archaeology is finding those marks, and they can't explain them away. Let's begin our investigation in Lebanon, at a site called Baalbek, known in ancient times as Heliopolis, the city of the sun. What remains there today is nothing short of impossible by conventional archaeological understanding. The Romans built a massive temple complex at Baalbek around 2,000 years ago. Impressive architecture, certainly. But the Romans built on top of something much, much older. Something they couldn't have created with their technology. Something that predates recorded history. I'm talking about the foundation stones. Beneath the Roman temple lies a platform made of megalithic blocks that defy explanation. These aren't ordinary stones. The largest of these blocks, called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, or Hajar al-Hibla, weighs an estimated 1,650 tons. That's over 3 million pounds. A single stone. To put that in perspective, the largest stones in the Great Pyramid of Giza weigh about 80 tons. Modern cranes max out at lifting around 20,000 tons, but only with extensive preparation and infrastructure. Yet somehow this 1,650-ton megalith was quarried, transported, and set perfectly into place as part of a foundation wall. But it gets better. Or more impossible depending on your perspective. 3 stones in the foundation wall, called the trilithon, each weigh approximately 800 tons. They're positioned about 20 feet above ground level in the western wall of the Temple of Jupiter. These stones are so large that there are gaps between them measuring less than a millimeter. The precision is beyond what modern technology could achieve with stones of that size and weight. Who moved these stones? How were they lifted and positioned with such accuracy? When were they placed? Conventional archaeology claims the Romans did it. But Roman records make no mention of this feat. Roman engineering, advanced as it was, couldn't move stones of this size. Their largest architectural projects used stones weighing 20 to 50 tons maximum. Suddenly they moved stones 40 times heavier than anything else they ever attempted, and left no record of this extraordinary engineering achievement? The local legends tell a different story. Ancient texts describe Baalbek as a pre-flood city built by giants. The biblical name for the region was the Valley of the Rephaim, the Valley of the Giants. Early Islamic sources claim the site was built by a tribe of giants after the biblical flood as a fortress. When you look at the scale of those foundation stones, when you consider the engineering required, when you factor in the precision of placement, the giant hypothesis suddenly isn't so crazy. In fact, it's the only explanation that makes sense. These stones weren't moved by humans of normal size using primitive technology. They were moved by beings of extraordinary stature with knowledge we've lost, or more accurately, knowledge that was deliberately lost when their civilization was destroyed in the flood. But Baalbek is just the beginning. The rabbit hole goes much deeper. Here's where it gets really interesting. Baalbek isn't an isolated anomaly. Around the entire world, we find ancient megalithic structures that share striking similarities, structures that seem designed for beings much larger than modern humans. Let's travel to Peru to a site called Sacsayhuamán, high in the Andes Mountains overlooking Cusco. The fortress walls there are constructed from stones weighing up to 200 tons each. These stones are cut with such precision that you cannot fit a piece of paper between them. No mortar was used. The stones were shaped with such accuracy that their own weight holds them together, even through centuries of earthquakes that have destroyed more modern constructions. The stones aren't just precisely cut, they're irregularly shaped, like enormous 3D puzzle pieces that interlock perfectly. Modern stonemasons admit they couldn't replicate this construction with contemporary tools and technology. Yet we're told the Inca civilization, using stone hammers and bronze chisels, accomplished what we cannot do with diamond-tipped saws and laser measuring devices. The Inca themselves told the Spanish conquistadors that they didn't build these structures. They said the walls were built by giants who lived before their time, in an age before the Great Flood. The Inca simply built on top of the giant foundations they found. Move to Easter Island. The famous Moai statues that tourists photograph are impressive, but they're relatively modern compared to the platforms they stand on. The Ahu platforms are made of precisely fitted megalithic stones, some weighing 80 to 90 tons. The official story says a primitive Polynesian culture transported and lifted these massive stones using only logs and rope. But oral traditions of the Rapa Nui people tell a different story. They speak of a time when the island was home to giants who moved the stones with magic, which likely means with technology and methods the storytellers didn't understand. Travel to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, currently dated as the world's oldest temple complex, built around 11,000 years ago. This site predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It predates the invention of agriculture, pottery, and writing. According to mainstream archaeology, this was built by primitive hunter-gatherers. Yet the T-shaped pillars at Göbekli Tepe weigh up to 20 tons each. They're carved with sophisticated artwork depicting animals, symbols, and humanoid figures. The level of organization, planning, and execution required to create this complex contradicts everything we're told about Stone Age humans. Unless they had help, or instruction, or were building for others. Puma Punku in Bolivia presents perhaps the most puzzling evidence. The stone blocks there are cut with machine-like precision. They have perfectly straight edges, perfect right angles, and smooth surfaces that appear polished. Some blocks have intricate notches and grooves that interlock like Lego pieces. Metallurgical analysis shows the stones were cut with tools harder than the hardest stone we know, techniques we cannot reproduce today. The blocks are andesite and granite, some of the hardest rock on Earth. Copper and bronze tools, which the ancient Tiwanaku culture possessed, cannot cut these stones. Yet someone did. And they did it with such precision that modern engineers are baffled. What ties all these sites together? They all feature stones of extraordinary weight that challenge conventional understanding of ancient capabilities, precision that exceeds what we can achieve today. No records or clear evidence of how they were constructed. Local legends attributing construction to giants or gods. Locations often mentioned in ancient texts as territories of the Nephilim or giant races. Coincidence? Or evidence? Now, before you dismiss this as ancient alien nonsense or pseudo-archaeology, understand something crucial. I'm not claiming aliens built these structures. The Bible already tells us who built them. The Nephilim built them. The giant offspring of the Watchers built them. And modern scientists are running out of excuses for why these megalithic sites exist. What's your theory? Were giants real, or is there another explanation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're connecting dots you've never seen before, subscribe to Godwin Scrolls because we're about to reveal even more suppressed evidence. Here's where the story takes a dark turn. Because it's not just that we're finding evidence of giant civilizations, it's that this evidence keeps disappearing. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, hundreds of newspaper articles documented the discovery of giant skeletons across North America. We're talking about reputable newspapers. The New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, regional papers from California to Ohio to Georgia. These articles describe skeletons ranging from 7 feet to over 11 feet tall being found in ancient burial mounds. Many articles specifically mention the Smithsonian Institution either funding the excavations or taking possession of the remains for further study. And then, nothing. The skeletons vanished. The report stopped. The Smithsonian claims no such skeletons exist in their collections. Researchers who file Freedom of Information requests are told no records can be found. In 1912, the New York Times reported on a discovery in Wisconsin. 18 giant skeletons with skulls, twice the size of normal, found near Lake Delavan. The article states the Smithsonian was notified and took possession of the remains. Where are they now? The Smithsonian says they have no record of them. In 1895, the Macon Telegraph reported giant skeletons found in Georgia, describing multiple burial mounds containing remains of people between 7 and 8 feet tall. The Smithsonian again was involved. Where are these skeletons? In 1911, miners in Nevada uncovered what became known as the Lovelock Cave Giants, red-haired mummified remains of people estimated to be 8 to 10 feet tall. Local Paiute Native American legends described a race of red-haired giants called the Cetacea who were cannibalistic and warred with their ancestors. The physical remains matched the legends perfectly. Some of these remains made it to museums initially. But over time, they've been removed from display, lost, or reclassified as normal height with measurement errors. Why would the Smithsonian, America's premier scientific institution, systematically deny and suppress evidence of giant humans? Why would hundreds of documented finds simply vanish from the historical record? The answer becomes clear when you understand the implications. If giants existed, it validates biblical accounts that mainstream science has dismissed as mythology. If the Nephilim were real, it means the Bible's account of pre-flood civilizations, fallen angels, and divine judgment is historically accurate. It means human history is not what we've been taught. It means evolution isn't the full story of human origins. For an institution committed to a purely naturalistic explanation of human development, evidence of giants is inconvenient. But the suppression goes beyond just hiding skeletons. It extends to interpretation of ancient sites. When archaeologists find doorways that are 12 to 15 feet tall in ancient ruins, they claim they're ceremonial or symbolic. When they find massive stone furniture, thrones, tables, beds, they say they were built to honor gods, not for actual use. When local legends consistently describe giants building these structures, they dismiss it as mythology despite physical evidence supporting the claims. The pattern is clear. Evidence that supports biblical accounts is systematically reinterpreted, hidden, or dismissed. Not because the evidence is weak, but because the implications are unacceptable to the naturalistic worldview that dominates modern academia. But you can't suppress truth forever. The stones remain. The megalithic sites stand. And new discoveries keep emerging that challenge the official narrative. Which brings us to recent developments that are shaking the archaeological community, developments that mainstream media is largely ignoring because they don't fit the narrative. In 2019 and continuing through 2023, archaeological teams working on the Transjordan Plateau in Jordan made a series of discoveries that sent shockwaves through biblical archaeology circles. They uncovered evidence of a massive ancient civilization that flourished in precisely the region the Bible identifies as the territory of the Rephaim, the giants. The findings include: first, remnants of enormous fortified cities with walls made of stones weighing 5 to 10 tons each, far larger than anything in typical Bronze Age construction. The cities show advanced urban planning with evidence of specialized districts, sophisticated water management systems, and defensive fortifications on a scale that seems excessive for defending against normal-sized humans. Second, Doorways and passages that are consistently 10 to 12 feet high, far taller than necessary for people of normal stature. The standard response is that these were made tall for ventilation or prestige. But when every structure in a city has abnormally tall doorways, that's not prestige, that's accommodation for the inhabitants' size. Third, pottery and tools of unusual scale. Cooking vessels that would require extraordinary strength to lift when full. Weapons that are impractically large for normal human use. Agricultural implements designed for hands much larger than ours. Fourth and most compelling, they found skeletal remains. Not complete skeletons, unfortunately. The region's climate and soil conditions make preservation difficult. But bone fragments, jaw pieces, and dental remains that suggest individuals of extraordinary size. The researchers are being very careful with their language, describing the findings as possibly indicating individuals of above-average stature. Academics speak for, these people were really tall, but we're afraid to say it directly. The dating of these sites places them in the Bronze Age, around 3000 to 1500 BCE. Exactly the time frame when the Bible places the Nephilim civilizations in that region. Remember, this is the exact area where King Og of Bashan ruled, whose bed was 13 feet long. The Rephaim dwelt before being driven out by Israel. The Emim and Zamzummim lived before them. Deuteronomy 2:10-11 specifically identifies as giant territory. The Emim dwelt there in times past, a people great and many and tall as the Anakim, which also were accounted giants as the Anakim, but the Moabites call them Emim. The archaeological evidence now matches the biblical text with stunning accuracy. We have the right location, the right time period, the right scale of construction, and physical remains suggesting inhabitants of extraordinary size. But here's what's fascinating. The researchers are struggling to explain who these people were within conventional historical frameworks. They can't connect this civilization to known cultures. The technology and organizational capacity exceeds what should have existed in that era. The whole thing is an anomaly. Unless you read the Bible. Then it's exactly what you'd expect to find. One researcher, speaking off the record, admitted, if these findings were in any other region, if they weren't in biblical lands, we'd be free to speculate more openly about the unusual characteristics. But because this is the Holy Land, because it touches on biblical narratives, there's pressure to be very careful with our conclusions. Translation: they know what they found. They know what it implies. But saying we found evidence of the biblical giants would end careers, cut off funding, and invite ridicule from the mainstream archaeological establishment. So the truth gets buried under carefully worded academic papers that hint at extraordinary findings without stating the obvious conclusion. But for those of us who study both archaeology and ancient texts, the conclusion is clear. They found Nephilim cities. They found evidence of the giants. They found physical confirmation of what the Bible has stated for 3,500 years. So why does mainstream archaeology fight so hard against acknowledging giant civilizations? Why is there such resistance to evidence that seems overwhelming when you look at it objectively? The answer is both simple and profound: worldview. Modern archaeology is built on evolutionary assumptions about human development. The narrative goes, primitive humans gradually developing, slowly advancing, linearly progressing from stone tools to bronze to iron to modern technology. Everything must fit this model. Giants disrupt that narrative. They suggest advanced knowledge existed before it should have. Catastrophic events reshaped human civilization, like a global flood. Non-human intelligence, the Watchers, interacted with humanity. The Bible's historical accounts are accurate, not mythological. For an academic establishment that has spent 150 years promoting evolution and dismissing biblical history as primitive mythology, Acknowledging giants means acknowledging they've been wrong about fundamental assumptions. It means rewriting textbooks. It means admitting that ancient texts they dismissed as religious fiction contain reliable historical information. That's too high a cost for most to pay. So instead we get megalithic sites attributed to unknown ancient cultures with surprisingly advanced technology, giant skeletons that vanish or get reclassified as tall individuals with measurement errors, structures built for 12-foot tall beings explained as ceremonial or symbolic, biblical archaeology that consistently confirms scripture being treated as controversial or fringe. But the evidence keeps mounting. Every year brings new discoveries that fit the biblical account and challenge the evolutionary timeline. Every new megalithic site discovered pushes back the dates of advanced human civilization. Every ancient text translated reveals stories of giants that match biblical descriptions. The dam is breaking. The truth is getting harder to suppress. And researchers who dare to acknowledge the biblical connections, who publish papers suggesting giants might have existed, who point out that evidence supports ancient texts, are finding a growing audience of people who've seen through the official narrative. Because at the end of the day, evidence speaks louder than academic politics. The question isn't whether giants existed. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is, why are we taught they didn't? What do you think? Is mainstream archaeology intentionally suppressing evidence, or is there an innocent explanation? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're tired of being lied to about ancient history, subscribe to Godwin Scrolls and hit that notification bell. We're exposing truth that others won't touch. Now, let's talk about why this matters beyond just historical curiosity. Because the existence of Nephilim cities and giant civilizations isn't just about the past, it has implications for prophecy in the future. Jesus made a startling statement in Matthew 24 verse 37. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Most sermons focus on the moral corruption and people being unaware of coming judgment. But what if Jesus meant something more specific? What characterized the days of Noah? Genesis 6 is clear. The Nephilim walked the earth. Fallen angels had corrupted human genetics. Violence filled the world. Hybrid beings dominated human civilization. If Jesus meant his statement literally, as it was, then we should expect similar conditions before his return. Are we seeing that today? Consider. Modern genetic engineering is advancing at breakneck speed. CRISPR technology allows precise editing of human DNA. Scientists are experimenting with human-animal hybrids, with creating enhanced humans, with extending lifespans through genetic manipulation. Transhumanism, the movement to transcend human biological limitations, is gaining mainstream acceptance. We're approaching the same ethical boundary the Watchers crossed. Corrupting human genetics, mixing things that shouldn't be mixed, playing God with the human genome. The ancient Nephilim cities stand as warnings. They show us what happens when the boundary between human and non-human is breached. They show us where genetic corruption leads. They remind us that God judged that corruption with global flood and complete destruction. Revelation speaks of a future where the mark of the beast changes people at a fundamental level, where accepting it means you can no longer be saved. What if that mark involves genetic modification? What if it's not just a tattoo or implant, but something that alters human DNA to the point where the image of God is erased? The ruins of Nephilim cities testify, corruption of human genetics brings judgment. Mixing with non-human entities produces abominations. Advanced technology without moral wisdom leads to destruction. These aren't just ancient ruins. They're prophecies in stone, warning us not to repeat the mistakes that brought the flood. So what have we learned in this investigation? We've seen that around the world, megalithic structures exist that cannot be explained by conventional archaeology. Stones weighing hundreds or thousands of tons, moved and placed with precision we cannot match today. Doorways built for beings twice our height. Cities designed for inhabitants of extraordinary scale. We've examined how the Smithsonian and mainstream academia have systematically suppressed evidence of giant skeletons and dismissed biblical accounts despite physical evidence supporting them. We've looked at recent discoveries in Jordan that are uncovering cities in the exact locations where the Bible places giant civilizations, cities with characteristics that match biblical descriptions perfectly. And we've connected ancient evidence to modern warning, recognizing that the existence of Nephilim ruins isn't just historical trivia, it's prophetic warning about genetic corruption and coming judgment. The lost cities of the Nephilim giants aren't lost anymore. They're being found. They're being excavated. And they're proving once again that the Bible was right all along. Genesis 6 wasn't mythology. It was history. The Nephilim were real. Their cities remain. And their ruins testify to both the accuracy of Scripture and the reality of divine judgment on those who corrupt what God created. Modern science will catch up eventually. The evidence is too overwhelming to suppress forever. But you don't have to wait for academic permission to believe what the stones themselves testify. The giants were real. Their cities remain. And their story warns us not to repeat the ancient corruption that brought the flood. What ancient site do you think provides the strongest evidence for giants? Tell me in the comments. And if this investigation opened your eyes to suppressed history, share this video, subscribe to Godwin Scrolls, and join us as we continue exposing the truth they don't want you to know. This is Godwin Scrolls. The stones remember what men have forgotten. And we're here to help you remember too. Until next time, keep seeking truth. Keep questioning the narrative. And keep your eyes open, because the evidence of giants is all around us, hiding in plain sight.